What's up, guys? Ben here, bringing you another video today. It is a Monday after the last weekend of Stage 1 Major 1 qualifiers for the event in Boston this weekend. We finally have gotten some clarity about, I think, where some teams place amongst the tiers, and I think the contenders for this event have become pretty clear, and the teams that I think are going to get dead last are sort of also clear as well. So let's take a look at our tier list from last week, make some adjustments, and lock in who we think is going to be the favorites, the losers, the dark horses, whatever you want to say for Major 1 starting on Thursday. So before we get into tier list, we're also going to kind of flip back and forth to the brackets and kind of explain my thought process on where people were in the standings based on where I think they're going to also place. And I'll do more of a thorough kind of bracket video, prediction video that's going to go up on Thursday. So here is the list from last week. And if you're new, let me explain how this works. We don't do the letters. I think the letters remove a lot of nuance in this and it makes it very subjective. So I do it this way. At the top, you have Sunday regulars. These are the teams I expect to make it to the weekend, make it to Sunday specifically. So there's going to be top 3, top 4. I think for the sake of this tier list, it's going to be top 3. Potential contenders is sort of the rest of usually the top 6, although I don't know if this one's really going to have 6 teams in it. We'll see. But basically, the rest of the teams, I think they have a chance to make it to the final. Work to do are teams, I think, like right on the edge. Really, they are teams I expect to get top 8 at this tournament and really be in the mix for fighting for champs. Maybe need a roster change, but not as bad as the teams below them. And that's where missing pieces come in. It's self-explanatory. They're missing pieces. They need to make a roster change. And for the sake of these pre-major videos, these are the teams I think are going to get top 12 at this event dead last. All right, let's take a look. We're going to start at the bottom. I think I started at the top last week, or I really don't remember, but I'm starting at the bottom for this one. First up, we're going to talk about the Las Vegas Legion. They did lose 3-1 or 1-3 rather to Toronto in their only match this weekend. Finally winning control, but they're one win, 6 losses so far on the season in that game mode. Through 7 games, the S&D has fallen off quite dramatically once people stop playing them on terminal. And then the hard point has been very up and down. They've had a couple of times and a couple opportunities through this stage to close out some hard points, but they haven't been able to do so. And that's really my concern with this Vegas team. I just don't really see the win conditions. I don't see the slang. I don't see the leadership. This just seems like a bottom feeder team, and nothing they have done really over the course of these 7 games convinces me that they need to move up a tier. On top of that, if you take a look at this schedule, they are, in a spot where they're going to play either Miami or OpTic for top 8, which I don't really expect them to be either team. Even though they went up 2-0 versus OpTic last weekend, they weren't able to close that out at all. So I think Vegas is getting dead last in this tournament. I don't really feel like it's worth moving them up a tier. The next team's interesting. The Carolina Royal Ravens. So they did make some changes this week, and they looked a little bit more competitive. They lost to FaZe in a game 5, but they rallied back in that series with a really good control and hardpoint win. And then against LA Thieves, that one also went to game 5. And I think Carolina had a really good chance last map and just kind of lost massive momentum in that. But I think the lack of search wins this weekend, they went 0 for 4 in that game mode. Either indicative this is not a good search team or just a lack that's any practice because they made 2 changes. But either way, that's their biggest weakness as a game out because they're 1-9 in search right now. And they weren't even winning searches with their old team. So I think they look better. Are they still good? No. But, the interesting thing for them is they're going to play either New York or ROKKR to get to top 8. And if it's Minnesota, I would think that there is potentially a chance, but Minnesota also 3-0'd them like a few weeks ago. So I don't know, man. I'm not enough for me to move Carolina off the bottom here. Want to see Fellow step up. I know just joined this team, but didn't have the best individual performance this weekend. I do want to tip Placer though. I thought Clay played very well this weekend and finally rebounded. And they got some nice stuff from TJ as well, from Gwen. If Fellow can kind of figure it out, they can figure out the search. Maybe get top 8. We'll see. Those could be really big points to make chance at the end of the year. And here's a team I'm going to move up a tier, the Minnesota ROKKR. They have locked in, man. After an 0-4 start, they have gone 3-0, and they had a very nice weekend, 3-0ing LAG. That was an upset. I had LAG winning that one, I thought, pretty cleanly. And then they took it to Seattle and won a game 5 in that series. There's still a few things with ROKKR that I'm a little bit sort of iffy about. I think Big Wake still hasn't really kind of shown the form we've seen in the last few years. I think in general, the AR slaying on ROKKR is a mismatch, definitely compared to other teams. Getting a lot out of Lintz and Reese Vivid, but both those guys played really well this weekend. So I think it's enough for me to move Minnesota up a tier because if we take a look at the schedule, they are going to start in winners. And they have drawn the New York Subliners, which amongst the FaZe Toronto New York trio, I think that's potentially the best draw that they could have gotten. So I could see ROKKR. Not a high chance, but I can see them winning that game. And even if they don't win it, they can bounce to losers, beat Carolina. Maybe they take care of Seattle or Boston, and then suddenly you're top 6 and you're cooking. So I like ROKKR's floor getting top 8. Don't know about top 6. Not willing to move in the potential contenders just yet, but they've done enough work the last couple of weeks to really move up a tier, and they just need to get a little bit more from their ARs, and I think they will be in a good spot to get a lot of points this weekend. Next up, we have the Boston Breach, and this is a tough one, man. They only had one series this weekend. They had to win it to make winner's bracket, and they came up just short in a high-rise S&D Game 5 against the New York Subliners. Like, they battled hard in that series, and I think this is sort of indicative of where this Boston team is at. They really play up to good teams, and they play down to bad teams. Their respawn's a bit iffy, the search is a bit iffy, but they're always potentially going to be competitive against these better teams, and you can see it when they beat Toronto before the break. I just haven't seen enough for me to put them in the potential contenders top 6 tier. And if we take a look at their draw, they are going to play either Toronto or Seattle for top 8, which is not an easy victory, but again, they beat Toronto earlier on this season, and they played Seattle before the break, and Seattle did beat them, but I just don't think Boston's going to square up on Terminal again. So I could see Boston, if they beat that series, they're going to probably have to beat like ROKKR or Carolina for top 6. I think they can potentially get it done. I just, not enough for me to move them up a tier, but unfortunately, I did not make winners bracket for this event, but they've got the tools to make a losers bracket one. I believe that they can get it done. So I'm going to kind of order this, I guess. I think in likelihood of who I have, it would probably be this. I know this now gets us to LAG, and we were really kind of high on this team after last week, but they went 0-2 this week and did not win a single map. They went 0-6, and I really think the issues at LAG are this. I just don't think talent-wise they have the slaying to really keep up with teams. I think Fame is super inconsistent, and when your sub player is super inconsistent, it's just making it very hard for them to win. I just also don't think they're a good S&D team, and when they have to grind these series, I'm not going to trust them to close out in a game 5. So they will, because of their performance in the beginning of the split, have an opportunity to start in winners bracket. They're going to lose to FaZe, and they're going to play LA Thieves, which is winnable, but then they're going to have to play probably Miami or Vegas or OpTic for top 8 or top 6, and I don't see that happening. So I think top 8 is probably where they're going to land right now. And next up, we have the Miami Heretics, and we're going to go ahead and move them up a tier. What a great rebound week from the folks at Miami after last week's absolute stinky against Seattle, against Boston. They needed to come out and really show that they're a quality team this week. I know supposedly their practice was kind of iffy, but they did some work, and they 3-0'd OpTic and 3-0'd LAG this week. After having a stinker last week, they had a good week this week. So for me, I think they are just on the edge of really being a team that I can like trust to make it deep in this tournament. I do think there's always a potential, you know, based on the way that the bracket works, right? They jump down to Vegas, and then they got to play Thieves or LAG. Like, they could potentially get top 8 here, but their rematch against OpTic, who they just beat, and then suddenly you're top 6. I don't see them beating FaZe, but I can see this Miami team making a loser's run, getting the top 4. I like where they're at. You know, sometimes the slaying is a bit iffy. We've seen Lucky and Metals come back to the pack. Juan's had a couple up and down games, but there's a lot of grit and teamwork and tenacity on this team. And I kind of like where their map pool's at. And I think they're going to be a hard out for a lot of teams. So definitely feel comfortable moving them back up a tier into potential contenders. And I think they'll get top 6 of this. I can see top 4, but I feel like top 6 is probably where they're going to get to, which would be a solid first event placing, to be honest. And then we got the Seattle Surge, and they're another team that I feel pretty good about being sort of in the top 6. I think we've seen enough from them, especially this weekend, that I feel pretty good about it. I know they lost to Minnesota, but I just think this team is always also going to be kind of a hard out. I think they're still, I feel like should be better than teams below them, but the Minnesota loss maybe gives me a little bit of pause. I just think the Seattle's team kind of issue is that they're a great search team. Even if you don't play them on Terminal, they're going to get rid of Karachi. They're undefeated on the other 3 maps. It's the respawns. And I think you get Terminal Hardpoint out of there, and I'm not really convinced by the rest of the map pool for them. You get, they don't really like playing High Rise, or High Rise hasn't really ended up in their series so far this year, and they haven't looked that great on Invasion Control, haven't looked that great on Karachi. The Seattle team's just going to have to kind of really grind these out and get to game 5. The other problem with Seattle, too, is they keep breaking GAs, so I don't know what their practice is going to be like before this event. So they're not. That's why I ordered Miami before them, because I think Seattle's the sixth best team, but Minnesota or Boston might be the sixth best team. And we got to really see how Seattle plays this weekend. If we take a look at the bracket, they've got Toronto. It's an interesting draw. I think Toronto's S&D is kind of in it. So I think Seattle's got a chance. And if they could drop down, they're going to have to play Boston. So I will say this for Seattle is it's a huge weekend coming up because there isn't a non-zero chance that they lose to Toronto and then they lose to Boston and they get double rounded. And then we have a very weird conversation that this team, as good as they are in search, might have some weakness. I think right now for me, if there's a player that really needs to step it up this weekend is Alec. He is the weakest link on their team right now as far as slaying. I think we've seen a lot from Abuza. We've seen great play from Kyler at times. We've seen some good play from Ilya as well. We're waiting for the Alec we saw in Cold War times of Vanguard to step it up. He has not done so this year, and he needs to because if they really struggle at this tournament, I think bringing in another sub player, moving Abuza to more of a full-time AR situation, we're bringing like a sub player who's playing a third AR right now. Might be the best play for Seattle based on sort of individual performances right now. All right, so this is where it gets interesting, the Sunday sort of regular piece here. And I've been kind of debating sort of all night, to be honest, and this morning on like what I wanted to do here. FaZe and Toronto 100% in this conversation. New York as well. It's really the OpTic situation. You know, after last week where they had the kind of iffy series against Vegas, I'm like, okay, well, you know, they're kicking off from there. And then they didn't really have a great week this week. You know, they lost to the hot Miami team. Didn't look that great in S&D. Lost to FaZe. Didn't look that great in S&D. And it's like the decision making with this team, the lack of cohesion with their sub players. There's just a lot of factors to me that make me think that I cannot really, with all certainty, say that OpTic is a Sunday regular right now. They have the potential to do it. But I just feel like going into Major 1, looking at the draw they have, the fact that they play Miami round 1, I just see a lot of landmines and opportunity for this team to just somehow not get top 3 or top 4 at this event. I just feel like they're farther behind a bunch of teams. So at the moment, I need to move them down a tier. Look, I think they're going to find their way into Sunday regulars by the end of the year, but they got to lock in and work on the things that I just outlined that are kind of holding them back as a team right now. I know, listen, that the FaZe series, there's ping inflation. They've obviously been dealing with a bunch of stuff. They had, you know, temperature issues at the facility during the Vegas series, but they got to figure out how to grind through that stuff. And I'm going to be honest, watching them play, the minimap looks weird. It doesn't feel like they're moving as a unit, that they're cohesive on S&D. They have a deep strap book on what they want to do as a squad. I feel like they are behind. They need to do stuff to catch up because the top 3 teams above them, you know, New York's prepared, you know, FaZe is prepared, and Toronto's consistent as well. They got to get to that bar right now, and they're not at it. All right, how do I want to do this? Let's start with New York. We'll go backwards in this because I feel like, to me, this is sort of the ranking of how I would do the top 3. But again, it's in no order because we haven't seen sort of the hosh posh at an event just yet. For New York, a bit of a fun weekend, I guess. They got kind of choke slammed bad by Toronto on Friday. It was a very uncompetitive series. I will say that, to be fair, I think Toronto definitely has something to prove in that series after, you know, how champs went for Toronto, in which they got absolutely chokeslammed in that one. And then New York had to grind out one against Boston that really got sketchy. Here's my assessment of New York right now. It is very similar to what we saw to Atlanta FaZe at points last year. They are, I think, going to be consistent in their placings this year. But I'm very concerned that their respawn is not as good as the other top teams. But their S&D is really, really good. And that might save them in a bunch of these series where, you know, they really only have like one guaranteed hard point, like maybe one bread and butter control. They just don't have a deep map pool right now. You look at hard point, you know, they've been solid on Karachi, they've been solid on Invasion and Skid Row, but, you know, sub base and terminal have not been it for them. You know, in control, they don't really seem to be the best at either of the 3 maps. But in S&D right now, they have a winning record in every single map, and they haven't yet played Invasion Search, but they don't need to when you're just, you know, crushing on those 4 maps. So I feel like, you know, taking a look at the draw here for New York, I feel like they can get past ROKKR. Toronto might be tricky for them, but you know, if they can win respawns against Toronto and get it deep in the series, I think they have a real chance. They're going to then get to the top side of this bracket, which I think is still doable for them. So I like New York's chances to, you know, if they lose to Toronto in winners round 2, like kind of battle back in a Sunday and really have a chance in loser semis. But right now I have to put them behind FaZe and Toronto because I think those other 2 teams are solid all 3 game modes, and New York right now is not. So let's talk Toronto then. Again, we just talked about the New York series. Great response from them. They then played Vegas. It's actually really funny. The Toronto-New York series was the last match on Friday, and then they Then they played the first match on Saturday. I don't know why the CDL does scheduling like that, but either way, Toronto looked good against Vegas. The only map again they dropped was a high-rise control, but that seems to be a map that Toronto's working on. They haven't looked great on the 2 times they played high-rise, so maybe won't really play it during the major, but they've looked good on Evasion and Karachi, so that is fine. The only thing for Toronto is it feels like right now their S&D map pool's a little bit tiny. I think when they play a team like a FaZe or a New York, they're going to have issues where they're going to need to probably play Invasion or high-rise control in a series, or Invasion and control S&D rather. And I don't really know if I'm confident on Toronto winning one of those maps. Like, it's a bit iffy for me. So we'll see. But Toronto is probably the best hardpoint team in the game right now. So I think they're still in a good spot, but the S&D is the one where they have a winning record in it, but I don't think that they're on the level of FaZe or New York right now in the game mode. They are in New York side of the bracket, but to be honest, I expect Toronto to get 2 winners finals and probably face FaZe. We'll talk about that more on Thursday, but I'm really feeling good. Like, Toronto to me is going to be in a good spot this year. The Envoy roster move has paid off. He's at a great stage other than the one stinky series, like things happen. Yeah, if you're a Toronto fan, it's business as usual. This team is going to be great all year. All right, and then the last team we're going to talk about is a team that's been the most consistent for the last 5 years in the CDL, and that is Atlanta FaZe. I think it's safe to say that the pickup of Draza has worked out beautifully for this team. They have not the only undefeated team in Stage 1 going 7-0. They did have an interesting weekend. That Carolina series did go to Game 5, although if you look at the map set for FaZe, then you probably, if you weren't 6-5-0, they're probably not letting sub-base hardpoint through to Carolina. One of the better hardpoint maps. So they were kind of, yeah, I think the last couple of series, especially I saw Toronto do it too in New York. Like, you're letting some of your opponent's best maps get in the pool because you want to play them on it before the major and kind of get a feel for some of the other issues or sort of fringe maps in your map pool. So I think FaZe probably, if they actually wanted to, could have maybe closed that out against Carolina, but also I wanted to play. Also played really well on those 2 maps. Just that the S&D was not close. So I at no point, I'm saying really worried about that. And then the OpTic series was well-disciplined play from FaZe. First map, they were down for most of it, and they really did a good job of, relying on their practice and getting those P4, P5s locked down on Evasion. The S&D was, bro, this FaZe team in search and defense is just so difficult to beat. They're just so disciplined. They play their numbers well. They move the map well. They really make it difficult for you to get that bomb down. And I think that's why they're probably, them in New York are probably 2 best S&D teams in the game right now. And the control high rise was fun, but FaZe showed, I think, why they're a little bit ahead of OpTic on that map. So, for me, if you're a FaZe fan, you look at the map pool, you look at the game modes right now, there really isn't a lot of weakness. I think the only thing is they haven't yet played Terminal S&D, but do they really need to play Terminal Search? These guys are great. Skid Row, Karachi, Invasion. I think high rise is probably, if you're FaZe, it's probably a choice between high rise or Invasion on the one that might sneak in a series, and they're probably going to choose high rise over Terminal in that situation. But the other S&D maps that they're going to get in the pool if they take Team B especially is going to be close to automatic. So I think if you're a FaZe fan and you look at the bracket draw, LIG obviously probably the weakest team they could have drawn. So that is a good W if you're a FaZe fan. And then I could see, Miami or OpTic being a fun series, but they kind of avoid, the Toronto or OpTic, Toronto or New York until winners finals. But FaZe is usually a guarantee in these things to get to the winners finals. These guys just don't lose in the beginning of winners bracket. So top 3, likely top 2 is where they're going to go. For me right now, Toronto and FaZe grand final. That's where we kind of had on the show last night, was sort of where we all netted as far as we think the matchup will be in finals. I think, again, if you're a FaZe fan, they've done what they needed to do in the beginning of this stage to go undefeated, to really round out the map pool, and now it's about executing the whole week at the major, not just on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, being the best team on Sunday. I think with Draza, they got an opportunity to really get back to that Cold War form. So we'll see if they can go ahead and win the first event, but they got to be one of the favorites up there with Toronto. So yeah, I think this tier list to me kind of makes the most sense. I feel good about sort of where teams fall on here. It's not a lot of this stuff is ordered. This bottom section, the missing pieces section, not really sure kind of how to order these teams. The work to do section's kind of interesting because I think a number of those teams could potentially get top 6 of this event, but I think the tier of teams above them is better. What we've seen from OpTic, not good enough for me to put them in Sunday regulars. And I think the top 4 has now become, at least for a week, the top 3 as far as my confidence of the 3 to 4 teams to make it to Sunday for top 4. So that will do it for this video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about this one. Coming up this week, we're going to do 2 preview videos on the major for the 12 teams. Do 6 in one, 6 in the other. And then on Thursday morning, I will drop my bracket prediction video. So make sure you check that out. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more. And as always, guys, we will see you on the next one.